Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Fading, my back hurts and my arms are tired. I'm fighting off sleep, though I'm flowing so well. I want one more poem to mark occasion, give rise to that voice inside, as I praise the Most High for conscious being. The ocean churns quietly, courting night in peaceful lullaby, until acquainting day in new rendering. Good night, sweet muse of uncertain word. Let us dance again tomorrow in new poem. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen, and I will be with you for the next 2 hours here on Studio B at freedomslips.com on Revolution Radio. And we're going to cover initially just some current events and some recent news stories that have come to light and just some interesting tidbits, and then we'll go into some other information. I don't really have a specific topic or a specific anything that I want to or need to cover this evening, and so I'll just kind of be sharing dialogue with you and watching the chat room and, making conversation and sharing fellowship with all of you and in dialogue. I have been doing recently a number of interviews with other broadcasters from different, I don't even know where they're doing their shows or where they're based, but a lot of people have asked me just recently to come on with them and to speak about some of the things that I've written and talked about in my books. It seems like there are a number of people whom are curious about, as far as the two bloodlines and the things that are connected to them, to that issue. Hello and welcome, Tinsel Worm and Agent 99 and Hal and Daku and Breezy and Lois Phoenix and Sky and Deep Blue and Chatfly and Sack and there's a lot of people, Jerbear and Ariana and all those that aren't on the initial stream moving upwards. I'm sure, Wild Bob and Cortec and Vibes and all of you, Delta, Deep Blue. Anyways, welcome and thank you for taking the time to join us and supporting all of us in the endeavors that we bring forth and trying to bring important issues, topics, and news of what we consider to be relevant to you for your consideration so that you can hopefully find some benefit from whatever it is that we may be discoursing about. And there's so many hosts on Revolution Radio, both on Studio A and Studio B, that you can find most anything being spoken about. And usually at least some of the hosts will be covering what are the most important current events of the day, or at least for that week, and probably multiple hosts, um, talking about it from one angle or the other. And so I think that's really interesting thing as far as Revolution Radio and the family that have congregated to be here and are utilizing Revolution Radio in such capacity to bring forth the information that we have opportunity to do so, is that you will get unique and interesting perspectives, and usually from various angles. And that certainly, as widely diversified as there are hosts upon the network, that you will also get that many opinions and that much various commentary about these, whatever it is that may be compelling, as far as, whether it's a false flag event or some kind of special circumstance, a sign in the sun, the moon, the stars, or, commentary about a new discovery or some new ancient book of wisdom, or some passage that has recently come to light, and that may be lighting up the web stream, at least the internet, and that many alternative news sources will be carrying it all at once. And so, and I know that a lot of you follow some of, as far as, like, I get some of the information that I post on fallenangels.tv, which is my main website, from beforeitsnews.com. And the reason I do so is because it's not controlled just by one individual, but it is user generated, in that the content is largely uploaded by all the individuals that have taken the time to sign up there, that have used it to share information, and that because it is from all of these individuals, the collective, the masses as a whole, you'll find information being, brought up from all eras, especially with the Grand Awakening that's been happening since the events of 9/11, and which really sparked a lot of us to look into, like the conspiratorial side of propaganda, which we know to be propaganda now, but what are the government official stories and the things which have been prior accepted just because it was broadcast on ABC or CBS or NBC, and nobody ever even really gave it a second thought and just accepted it as truth because it somehow found its way on one of the the mainstream news outlets. But now we know that, especially with the big three, that they are largely working in tangent, and that the information parallels on all broadcasts, and that now, ever since with the Patriot Act, and there now is a whole and budget, a huge budget put forth by the government to create news content, which would then be shared and passed out to all the official networks, so that they can basically toe the party line and share the propaganda that's been generated by government to sway public opinion one way or the other. And so now it's absolutely undeniable that most of what we are seeing, especially with, like CNN, those things which cover so-called world news, is basically only propaganda, and it's a tool utilized to guide and direct opinion one way or the other. And that most of the time, such public opinion is gleaned only to support a topic or an agenda. And that all of this was laid out, dozens, if not hundreds of years ago, and that this information is also cited very precisely in the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, and how they talk about that all they need to do really to control the masses is buy off both parties and certain political representatives, and then to own the media, and that includes, TV and radio, and also what was then hard paper, newspaper, and the columnists and the different individuals that work for such publications, or that are, the bobbleheads on TV, and that they could then basically control reality and also control what is perceived as truth or lie. And having asserted their authority and basically unified all these various individual news and media outlets, whether TV or radio or newspaper or magazine even, that they have unified all of them under a few such companies like Rupert and Murdoch, all of these different, what seem to be individualized, separate pieces are controlled from the top down, and they cannot really present information that is critical of what they are trying to pull off as reality. And so it's an interesting world we live in. But now, those of you that are seekers and that have done your research, you, like myself, have been called to seek out new forms and new places of gathering your information. And that places like beforeitsnews.com, and where you have this user-generated content, I think are invaluable. It's just like all of us coming together here and sharing fellowship on the different, like my show and the other shows, that because there's so many of them. But the fellowship that we share is absolutely critical and totally invaluable, because where else are you going to find a group of individuals that have done the time and done the homework and have spent a large part of their focus in trying to educate themselves to what is really going on in the world? I mean, you have most of the people that are totally okay with being told by those that get paid to do such a job what to believe and what not to believe, and what is relevant and what isn't. And for anybody that knows anything about the Illuminati and the New World Order agenda, as to what they really think of us, the useless eaters, cattle, sheep being led to slaughter. Um, why would you buy into such a system? Why would you allow these corporate fascists give them any of your attention and allow them to subject you to their programming? It doesn't make sense. All right. And so, I do want to talk about a few news items which I thought were relevant and very interesting. And I'm going to post a link to an interview that is only about, I think it's like 30 minutes long, but it's an interesting interview. It's John B. Wells, and he does a interview with a researcher. The guy's name is R.S. Lemriel. And what is interesting about this individual in his interview is that he talks about in his study of learning about the rulers that from behind the mask are dictating the destiny and the fate of mankind. And he asserts, like many of us have now learned, that these particular rulers are an interdimensional dragon-like, that these beings are dragon-like in their form and embodiment. And that this also, goes right along with what we were talking about as all of the mythology which is surrounding the feathered serpent, the dragon, that ancient dragon, that old serpent that, according to Revelation 12, is deceiving the entirety of the world. And so I know those of you that follow this show are interested in such topics. Lois Phoenix, are you asking me a question? I'm not positive on that, but anyways, interesting interview. I would recommend that people take a listen to this, because he also talks about how our government has been working in tangent, or at least the shadow government has been working in tangent with these particular beings to subjugate the masses and to provide them with technology for which they are able to then, do this whole mass mind control, and also technology in order to basically assassinate or suicide or terminate individuals, with making it look like an accident. Things of that kind of nature. The secret space program and how they've been involved in establishing and attempting to gain access to technologies which have otherwise disappeared, as far as this particular planet, because of the global flood, which during Noah's day, which covered up a lot of the cultures, the pagan cultures and civilizations that had access to high technology, and that the elites are also involved in attempting to gain access to other parts, like the moon and Mars, where there may be remnant such technology. And I can't remember if all this that I'm saying right now was found in that interview, because I, like you, digest a lot of information, but it's very interesting to say the least, because of the light that it shines upon the these ruling, these Nakash, these dragon-like beings, and that there's even Michael Heiser, who's very well known and very well respected as he's able to read the original Hebrew and Aramaic and these ancient languages and to translate them. He has also done a video on the reptilian beings, or the Nakash, or the shining ones, the enchanters, magicians, whom we also refer to as the Annunaki, or the rebel angels. And so our history, our ancient history, those things which have eluded us to great degree, especially, hello vibes, okay, no worries at all, but have escaped us to large degree, so that we do not understand our ancient past. And it's important, in my opinion, for us to be able to study the histories and the mythologies, and to look at the geological and archaeological records and glean that indeed they're, unlike most mainstream churches teach to their congregations, that the history of the whole universe falls within 6,000 years, but that all the things that contradict such a notion, that we understand that even in Genesis 1 in verse 1 and 2, that when it talks about the earth becoming null and void, that there are, who knows, millions, billions of years which precede the earth becoming null and void. And I've talked about what was actually the event that resulted in the earth becoming null and void, and even according to the Sumerian mythology and that of the Enuma Elish and certain these Babylonian creation epics and these Akkadian epic creation accounts, that event is even ancient and goes very far back in the history of what is this solar system. And that even the arrival of the Anunnaki, or the rebel angels, here upon the planet far surpasses 6,000 years. And according to the timetable that is set forth by Berosus, who was the Chaldean historian that was tasked by Alexander the Great to write about the Priortimes, the prehistory, the epochs and eras that occurred before the modern creation of humanity, and even Mantheo in his work for the Egyptians, and also tasked with similar pursuit to relay and to write down the story of the so-called gods with the little g, and the demigods, the hybrid beings that were born to them, and the reign of these gods in what Hesiod speaks about as the golden age, when the so-called gods ruled upon the earth, that all of this has been relegated to only being passed down in mythological accounting, and that most people do not believe or glean any kind of a truth from these symbolic accounts. And so because they relegate this to a fantasy or a childhood fairy tale, they miss out on so much that is important as far as understanding the world and what we are dealing with as a people. Because you can find truth, and that most of the mythological accounts worldwide are based upon truth which has been largely forgotten, and that we have really forgotten as a world and as a collective, as a people, more than what we retain as knowledge. And it's surprising that we even have the story of Atlantis passed down from culture to culture, and that because it was written about by Plato, and because of the works of Plato had been basically honored by the Western culture and Western civilization, that we still have such mythology surrounding an ancient culture which preceded all those that we know about, and that this particular culture had high technology and capability that we should at least study or try to learn more about, and that they may have surpassed us greatly in what they were able to accomplish even way back then. And so we'll talk about some of these things when we return from break. We're right at the line for what would be the first break, and we'll also talk about some of these current events which I feel are, related somewhat to this information. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. I did post a link in the chat room to that interview that I was talking about on the John B. Wells show with this R.S. Lemuel, and the intro. It's only 30 minutes long. It's very interesting, though, in that he talks about some of our ancient past and our prehistory. But anyways, just to elaborate a little bit more in talking about the Berosus, one of the interesting aspects about his work is that he has written about a king's list, which matches the Sumerian king's list, and that if you're not aware of the king's list, that the first rulers on this list are cited as having ruled for thousands of years. I believe the first one was like 6,000 years, the next like 24,000 years, and that it keeps descending in time until we get to, I believe it's Menes or -1, and that he's cited as being the first Egyptian pharaoh. Some speculate that he's also the King Minos of mythological accounts, and that these first rulers are not human at all, but that they are tantamount to being the fallen angels themselves, or the rebel angels, not the watchers that are mentioned, the 200 watchers mentioned as having descended to the earth during the time of Yared, which was Enoch's father, and that was after the modern creation of Adam and Eve by Yahweh Elohim, and that particular, the history of modern humanity only goes back 6,000 years, but that we're talking about far into our ancient past, and to even the arrival of these Sumerian Annunaki here, which are the rebel angels. And if you're interested more about that in Second Enoch, which is the book of the secrets of Enoch, there's a mention as to when it was that the rebel angels were cast out of the heavens, and that this event occurred on the second day, shortly after the separation of light and darkness, the division of good and evil, and that is also when the war in heaven occurred, and that being cast out, they were exiled here, and it eventually came to be trapped. And Nibiru, their planet, came to be trapped in this solar system, and that it was, sometime whenever that occurred, which it goes again way, way back in history. It could be millions of years, who really knows? But when their planet initially became part of this solar system, on the initial capture by what was the outer planets, the gravitational field of the outer planets, specific Neptune and Uranus, that it Nibiru as a planet was brought into conflict because of the orbital rotation of Nibiru, which goes rotates in in a clockwise fashion, whereas all the other planets of our solar system, they rotate on their orbital, in their orbits in a counterclockwise fashion. And so, with the way that it was captured, and with the way that it spins around the sun and where it crosses the ecliptic, when it was initially captured, it was one of the moons, called the Western Satellite, was actually, it was pulled into the gravitational field of what was the old Earth, which is called in the Enuma Elish and also some of the other creation stories, Tiamat. It's cited in the book of Job as being Rahab. It's also referred to as Maldak by some of the New Age channel teachings, and it was this particular moon, this satellite, hitting the Earth that gutted the Earth, and gouged it out where the Pacific Ocean now is, and that the remnants of this cataclysm resulted in not only the asteroid belt, but all of the asteroids and comets that are flying, in awkward pattern, and that those that survive to this day, that weren't initially slammed into the other, like the moon and Mars, that this event was also responsible for the destruction of the atmosphere and the culture and the civilization that was already in place on Mars, and that even the fine dust particles that settled to become the rings around Saturn, and there are other planets that also have rings, that this is all remnant of that particular cataclysm. But even in the Sumerian teachings, this event happened a long time ago and prior to their arrival here upon the earth. Hello, Wild Bob, and Grog, Silamo, and all the others that have joined us. I appreciate you, Count Cranula. There's so many funny names. But anyways, and so this particular event is cited as ancient history, even for the Sumerians and for what they talk about. And it was later when they started to undergo ecological disaster. They also, much like we do now on this planet, with the burning of fossil fuels and the use of coal and other aspects of our fuel consumption, that it degraded their ozone field. And you know how scientists have speak about how there's a hole in our ozone, that this kind of thing occurred on their planet, and that their scientists were tasked with coming together to find a solution to the particular the ecological disaster that they were suffering every time they came close to the sun in their orbital proximity, and that the X-rays and the gamma rays and the things that were allowed to penetrate through what was their protective layering of their atmosphere, that it was wreaking havoc upon the planets and also the tides and the oceans on their particular planet, and it was devastating their creatures that are living also on that particular planet. And so they tasked their scientists with finding a solution, and it took them, I think it mentions several shars, which each shar, one shar is one cycle or one orbit around the sun for their planet, and it is equal to 3,600 years, according to our what is one Earth year. That's really just 1 year for them, but it's equivalent to 3,600 Earth years, and so it took several thousand years of Earth time for them to find a solution, which would only be 2 years in their particular time. And so their scientists decided that the best way to remedy such situation, in which we might also be able to learn from this particular chronicle, in this Sumerian accounting, is that they had to crush up gold into a powder form and suspend it into the atmosphere in order to refract the sun's rays and to protect their planet when they were again close in proximity to the sun during their orbital rotation. Hello, Grog, and welcome, Dolores and Zippy. And so this is the story that we get as to why it was that they came here in the first place, to gather the gold. Because after the destruction of the earth, they were able to peer into the innards of the earth, and they realized that the earth had an abundance of gold, and that more so than any other of the planets that they had explored and searched out, seeking it as metal. And so it was after one of their kings, Alalu, he thought he was going to be eradicated or removed from office, that according to the accounting, he was the first to arrive here to the earth, and he blasted his way with nuclear weapons, or weapons of terror is how it's cited, through the asteroid belt, and that the asteroid belt had served as a barrier for a very long time, who knows how long, probably since this event, for a very long time, and that had kept the rebel angels from exploring the inner planets. And that once he was able to blast through and arrive here to the planet, he utilized what I guess is long-range radio. I don't know that, we have such radio that would give us such reach, but he was able to, from his ship, to communicate with people on his own planet. Now, I don't know where the planet was as far as, in its cycle, in its orbit, as to where it was as in respect to where the Earth was, but he was able to reach them and to communicate with them, and he told them that he had found gold, and then they sent another search party of 50 Annunaki heroes, as the story relates, and that Ea, Prince Ea, was one of the ones that had tasked that he was over this particular group that arrived here, and that he established the first colony, which is called Eridu, and that the next 4 cities that were established were created and established to smelt and to mine the ore and to prepare it for shipping back to Nibiru so the scientists could use it to patch the hole within their ozone and to protect the planet from the harmful rays of the sun. And so this is the purpose that they had for coming here, and that they had established as precedents for colonizing and establishing certain bases in certain parts of what was then the Middle East. And that they were then trying to gather and to mine the material, this particular gold, from the waters of the Middle East, but then having explored the planet and established a grid, and to have broken it up in map-like form in longitude and latitude, however it was that they did that, they discovered that in South Africa, and in Africa as a continent as a whole, that they didn't even have to mine for the gold, that a lot of it was just laying out on the earth, and all they had to do was really gather it, and that it would be a lot easier work. And so Ea was tasked with establishing the Abzu and mining in the Abzu, and that when they went to work, when the Anunnaki went to work in these particular mines and were tasked with gathering the gold and refining it and smelting it and sending it back, that they were then not fond of the menial labor that they found their lives being consumed by. And so that is when it cites in the Sumerian text that they decided upon genetically manipulating what was called the primitive worker, which, if you look at the text, basically this primitive worker was nothing more than a Sasquatch, or what we know as the Bigfoot. Yeah, Bigfoot, Yeti. And that they utilized this particular being, they attempted to create a slave race of this particular being. And that is really the genetic manipulation that they were involved in. And it was because they attempted to create a slave race out of this particular creature that we have the accounting of Yahweh Elohim, or Yahweh, or the Most High, the Creator that they even called the Creator of us all, in their text, creating modern humanity. And most people think that it was or a lot of people think, there's a lot of PhD and people that have written a lot of books, and especially all those that have, joined that whole clique as far as the Ancient Aliens series. They all cite and believe that the rebel angels were the creators of modern humanity, and that is not the case. That in fact, their manipulation and their creation goes to having experimented upon this particular Bigfoot creature. Anyways, and the reason I cite all this is because the Priortimes and those things which are connected to, and there's a lot of new stuff coming to light as far as cultures and civilizations that are being discovered at the bottoms of, certain oceans, or even in certain lakes, like we have Lake Titicaca, and that there's a lot of artifacts at the bottom of that lake. There's the history of Atlantis. All these different things are connected to what the Egyptians refer to as Zep Tepi, or what I refer to as the Priortimes. And that all of this mythology, the reign of these feathered serpents and the worship of them worldwide, occurred before the modern creation of humanity. And that all of these things were established. Many of the megalithic structures that we see worldwide, many of the, even with the mythology surrounding Atlantis, that these things go back and are connected to who the rebel angels or the Annunaki are. And as I mentioned earlier, chapter 29 and chapter 30, that you can find in there, the account of Lucifer and the rebel angels being cast out of the heavens on the second day, and that from the second to the sixth day is the period that we refer to as Zep Tepi, or the first times, or the era when the gods ruled over the earth. All right, we're almost to another break. But before we get there, I'm going to post a link to a video that talks about this particular individual that had done, I don't remember his name. Let me see if it cites it. Sir William Petrie. We'll be right back, but check out this video. All right, welcome back, everybody, for a second hour of Momentary Zen. I'm your host, Zen Garcia, and we've been speaking about the kind of somewhat the history of the Anunnaki and Nibiru, and also that of the solar system, and specifically our planet and the destruction of it, and how it pertains to the earth becoming null and void, as it's reference cited in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, and between verse 1 chapter 1 and verse 2 of chapter 1. But anyways, before I continue with this particular topic and speaking about these things, I do want to remind the listening audience and those that will tap into the later archive that there are certain bills that we do have to continue to pay in order to be able to come to you on a regular basis in the way that we do, and that even though Revolution Radio is listener supported and commercial free and corporate free, that we are only able to do and continue to do as we do, be out of the kindness and the graciousness of individuals and the monetary donations that are provided from the listener support, yourselves, those of you that listen to other shows, and that without you, we would not be able to continue in such endeavor. And that we also have aspirations of increasing our outreach and in sharing our work in other aspects, in however way, but specific with, going and making and expanding the broadcast to satellite, which would certainly give us an increased outreach immediately, and that people would be able to tune into our work and listen to the various hosts without even having to log on to their internet, that they would be able to pick us up on satellite receiver anywhere in the world, even if they were, on some remote island somewhere and that had no access to power source or to computer, that as long as they had, satellite access, that they would certainly be able to hear the things that we were talking about. And so Nighthawk has been endeavoring to do this for quite a while now. I don't know how really close he is to achieving this as a reality, but we do appreciate all of you, not only for just your dialogue and your fellowship and giving us your time and coming to listen to us in the ways that you do, for also for your support in purchasing in coffee mugs and t-shirts, the non-GMO seed packs, or buying just simple access to the archives. That each one of these things, or just simple donations of $5 or $10, or 10 or 15, whatever it is that you can provide without hurting yourself, because certainly we want you to take care of yourselves and your families and feed your children first and foremost. But if you can, please do go to freedomslips.com, click the donate button. Those of you that have access to the chat room, there's a donate link immediately on the left, and that's very easy to do, so that you can provide or even utilize a credit card by just using PayPal. And for those of you that are not using PayPal or have not used PayPal or signed up with them, I think PayPal is a really incredible tool, because it gives us all ability to pay for things that we shop for online without having to give out all of our credit information or our credit cards, or our our CVC numbers or expiration dates or anything of that nature, or any of the details of that, and that we don't have to put ourselves at risk. So you might definitely, if you are not a user of PayPal already, might want to sign up for just that reason. And so anyways, just know that we appreciate you, and we pray and wish all of you to have really incredible holidays, and to gatherings with your family and your loved ones, and that you that you are blessed going into what is a new year. It's crazy to think that we're almost to 2015. How insane is that? And I'm also glad and very grateful that we are still in a relative period of peace and, joy, and that we are not having to contend with, um, being bombed or troops on invading our front lines and that of our little towns, even though we know that invasion is covertly going on by the United Nations peacekeeping troops and those that um, have been tasked with watching over us domestically. That really, it's a blessing that we're able to enjoy the quality of life and the serenity and the peace that we do, as far as small town America. And so, I appreciate all of you and thank you for joining us and supporting us in all the ways that you do. I had posted a link in the chat room prior to going to break, and I will do so again, of a video which I find very interesting, and I'm going to tell you the story of it. I was in the process of doing that before we went to. I'm sorry, everybody. I had it on mute, and I apologize. I realize that now. And so I'm not even going to go over all that I just said. But I was talking about. I'm back, sorry. I was muted. I apologize. But basically, the first 10 minutes I was basically talking about how we appreciated you and needed your monetary donations to continue in the endeavors that we are, that all of us are doing as family members here. And so thanks, Jer Bear, and all of you that contacted me to remind me that I'm a ding ding and that I had left it on mute. Anyways, and so, okay, well, I'm glad that you can laugh. Well, you can laugh at me and with me because I'm a ding ding. Anyways, all right. So I was talking about these alien artifacts that are depicted in this video, and how there are two mummies that accompanied the discovery of these relics, and that the individual that had found them, a Sir William Peachtree, he lived in Jerusalem, and that the representatives of the Rockefeller Museum came to claim these artifacts. Now, whether they'll all be displayed and made public is, it could be that they are much like the Smithsonian, and that they're going to disappear any evidence of the ancient alien phenomena or interactions with these particular, what are, in my opinion, demonic entities. But anyways, that these two mummies were found of these gray aliens, very old, and found in an interior enclosure within the Giza complex, and that one of the artifacts they show, and you can find an article on this on my website, fallenangels.tv, alien Egyptian artifacts discovered in Jerusalem, and there's a picture of this. It's like a pharaonic head, much like the Tutankhamun mask, but not all glittered in gold and lapis lazuli and these gemstones, but that the depiction looks like a gray alien with a pharaonic headpiece, almost like as if one of these being served as Pharaoh at some point. But it's interesting also that I guess the headpiece, that the sides of it are engraved in hieroglyphics, and that some of these hieroglyphics depict encounters and interactions with these particular beings. And how this all ties into who the Anunnaki are, it's my opinion that the Greys, or what we know to be the Greys, that they are just a worker class entity that was, you know, perhaps created by the dragon-like seraphim angels, the Anunnaki, which are the winged serpents, the dragons of old mythology. And that if you look closely at the headrests, I mean the, the uh, what is part of the headpiece, you can see symbols symbolizing the descent of what are obviously, like UFO type craft. And it depicts also some kind of beams being shot out from the bottom of the craft. And so, these particular relics are, and there's also been, like Klaus Donna just recently did a video where he talked about some artifacts that have been discovered in Mexico, these Mayans. Well, thanks, Jer Bear. Yeah, I'm very much a real person, and I make a lot of stupid mistakes, as do we all. But Klaus Donna, if you look up recently discovered artifacts and his name on YouTube, I'm sure you can find a video that depicts some of these ancient these artifacts, which also are similar in display to the hieroglyphic depictions of the interactions of these gray alien type beings, and that, these abductees that speak about being taken on board on these kind of craft, they also reference the Greys, these little ones, as being only the helpers to what are the large praying mantis type beings that are the doctors or the scientists, those that are actually conducting the experimentation, that are removing from the men sperm, and from the women ova, genetic material in order to, who knows what they're doing with it. It's my opinion also that they are still conducting genetic experimentations, and that some of the women that are being go to the website, Grog. Let me go ahead and post a link to the video again in the chat room. He's asking what pictures I'm talking about. You can find them in this video, the artifacts that I'm referencing and talking about. And if you go to my website at Fallen Angels TV, the name of the article is Ancient Alien Egyptian Artifacts Discovered in Jerusalem. And if you click on that that article, you'll see a depiction of this relic that I'm talking about, and how it absolutely looks like a serpentine reptilian being with a feathered headdress, with large almond eyes, and the distinctly, like they have no nose, or are missing, but have two tiny little nostrils, and then the very stern-like lips. Very interesting, this particular relic. And then there's also a picture of those that had discovered it however long ago, with one of the mummies of these little grays with the almond-shaped eyes, and how this mummy can't be more than 3-4 feet tall. I mean, it's really small for a being. And there's also another image of one of the skulls which looks like the Star Child skull, except for it's the entire skeleton intact. With full body and this Star Child like skull with the large almond eyes. Very interesting to say the least. I hope there is more information released about this particular find. You're welcome, Grog. And Grog did post a link to the Secret Russian Alien book, which you can also find this on YouTube, and it's interesting in that it has depictions, and it's said to have been given to certain individuals when they reach really high power, like Putin was given a copy of one and allowed to look through it. Mendevev, he recites how he had been given and informed upon such matters. And so it's a very interesting book, to say the least. All right, we're almost to our next break, and so we'll try to finish up in what would be the last part. I had promised the listeners over at Facebook that I would touch upon some of the our pre-existence and our return to our first estate. And so if I'm able to, I'll get to that. If not, then I'll follow that up in the next show and cover some of that material, and promise to make a focus of it in that show. And I'll even bring out some scriptures and some passage that are connected to that. Not a lot, because I know that you would rather hear me talk about these things rather than just read a whole lot of material to you. And so I'll limit that on this particular show. But we'll be right back for final segment. All right, welcome back, everybody. And I want to thank all the new listeners that have not joined us previously. I believe, Grog, this might be one of your first times, and I noticed that there's a lot of listeners in the chat room that I'm not familiar with as far as your chat handles. And so I thank you for taking the time to join us, and I hope that you are intrigued by the things that we're talking about, and I hope that you find some relevance in the rant that I've been espousing over the past hour and a half. We do cover some very interesting topics, and I do have a unique perspective on what is, I believe, the full summation of history and mythology in connection to the biblical, as far as the Gospels and prophetic word, and also the Sumerian chronicles and the wisdom texts and teachings from other cultures worldwide. And I've even read things like the Colburn Bible in its fullness, which is an interesting text, and it took me a whole summer to endeavor to do. It's quite a bit of reading material. It's one of my favorite books as well. And things like Oasapi, which is another 900-page book. And I've read all the apocryphal, pseudepigraphal, the Nag Hammadi codices, the extra-biblical, extra-canonical text, and all of that. And so I am able to discern from all that, and I feel like the books that I published, like specific Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here, my 6th book, covers all the things that we're talking about this evening. with the Priortimes, with the fall of the rebel angels, begins with the war in heaven, how the rebel angels ended up being here upon the planet, how they were exiled, how they were here before we were, their interdictions, their genetic experimentations, and their attempts to create a slave race out of the Bigfoot type pre-Adamic human that was already found upon this planet, the destruction of Tiamat, the creation of the new earth, how the earth became null and void, the timeline for creation, the rule of the dragon lords, all of that is contained within that particular book. And it also includes our pre-existence and how we were part of the Elohim, the sons of God that were part of the council of the mighty, as it refers in Psalms 82, and that we, before incarnating into flesh form in our current embodiments, that we had spiritual lives before the ones that we find ourselves in now, our flesh forms, that we're caught up in the flesh, but that really we are angelic spiritual beings, and that we're tied to and caught up in the flesh and in a fallen world under the control of these devils and demons for what would be short time, for 6,000 years until the return of Christ, when the evil will be eradicated and the terrors shall be judged, and the wheat gather for the barn. And so all these things are written about in that particular book, The Sons of God. And if you're interested, any of you are interested in any of my books that may want to get them for Christmas presents to pass out to your loved ones, to your family members, you can contact me at zengarcia.com. I am the author of 7 books. My first book, Look Somewhere Different. My second book, When the Evening Dies. My third book, A Different Way of Being. My fourth book, which is the most controversial, but which, in my opinion, absolutely explains how everything really is and the reality that we're really dealing with, and the war between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and how it is that this war would be ongoing until the harvest. That all of that is found in my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, and that I help you to understand what the parable of the garden parable is referencing, as far as Eve eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and how that tree represents Satan and Lucifer, and how the eating of that fruit actually resulted in Eve's impregnation with Cain, who was the firstborn hybrid son of the devil, and how he has his own bloodline and his own lineage here upon this planet, and that lineage is also connected to what Christ referenced the Pharisees as being of their father the devil, and that Cain is cited in John chapter 8 as being of that wicked one, and that the elites that rule over the thrones of the world today, and all of our presidents that are blood related, that they are of the sons of Cain, and that in fact all the people here on this planet are not alike, that we are not all, wishing and hoping for and wanting to extend goodwill to each other, and hoping to that all people everywhere can enjoy the same rights and freedoms that we enjoy here in this particular country. Because the sons of Cain, they are at every turn of the way waging war against us and trying to create order out of chaos, the agenda of the New World Order, to depopulate the sons of Adam, to poison the vaccines and the food and the water, genetically modified food, and all those things that are written on the Georgia Guidestone. This is exactly what they are attempting to do and what they want to do, um, as far as the reality that we are dealing with, and why it is that we see a prevalence of evil still in this world when we're supposed to be all, you know, so highly advanced and technologically advanced and spiritually advanced, when we are none of those things. And so that particular book speaks about the war between the bloodlines. My fifth book, Awaken to the New World Order, talks about my awakening to the New World Order and how I became aware of the false flag terrorism, the government sponsored terror, and how it is that governments worldwide, they basically fund the boogeyman and then pull it out of the closet and, the jack in the box whenever they need a convenient terrorist event in order to spur further funding for their security measures or their police state measures, um, or homeland security, whatever you want to call it. um, you know the it's all the same agenda worldwide, and all the nations of the world are being conditioned in the same way. You see the terrorism, the boogeyman, Taliban, Al Qaeda, now it's ISIS or the Muslim Brotherhood. They're all funded by the governments of the world. And then all these terrorists are pulled out of the shadows whenever they need a convenient excuse to spurn, the order out of chaos, or the problem reaction solution, the Hegelian dialectic to force the agenda or to pass a Patriot Act or whatever, you know. So that's my fifth book, Awaken to the New World Order. My sixth book is Sons of God, Who We Are, Why We're Here, and it covers all the things that we're talking about now, the reign of the Dragon Lords, the Annunaki, and the timeline for creation, our humanity's pre-existence, our current incarnation into flesh form, and how it is, there will be a minority that has a return to our first estate. All those things which I'll be talking about in the next show, next week. So if you're interested in these topics, definitely do join us, because I'll elaborate further upon those things. And then my seventh book is called Skyfall, The Angels of Destiny, and it is specific upon and elaborates upon the sons of God, as to, I explain election, our current circumstances and situations, those things that we are born into. I explain reincarnation and incarnation, how we're the angels of destiny, and how we were predestinated, and we had pre-existence before coming into the flesh, just as it talks about in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, where it says the word of the Lord went to Jeremiah and told him, I had known you before you ever entered into the womb of your mother. I had foreordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. And so that that particular thing extends to all of us, not just Jeremiah. And so, yes, if you're interested, Grog or anybody else, if you're interested in any of these books, I can bundle them and give you a discount, and I will also autograph them free of charge. I do currently have and I have a special running on what is the second edition, the release of the second edition of my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, which was exclusively released through the Prophecy Club, and which I'm now making available to the public. If you're interested in this, I'm currently running a special rate. They usually sell for $25 a piece. I'm selling them for $15 a piece, autographing them free of charge. And if you order more than 10 copies, I'll give them to you for $10 a piece so that you can give them as presents to your loved ones, to those you think might be interested in these particular topics, and that the information that is contained within that book, in my opinion, is a skeleton key to the information that is contained and veiled within the scripture. And that if you read that book, you will be able to understand and to read the Bible in a way that you never had prior. Just my opinion. But I do believe that it is a skeleton key to help you to unlock and to understand not only the Old and the New Testament, but also the Apocrypha, the Pseudepigrapha, the forgotten books of Eden, the forbidden books of the Bible, all these collections of work, because they all have reference to the material that is contained within that particular book. And so either contact me through email at zengarcia.com or just contact me on Facebook under Zen Garcia. All right, well, I appreciate all of you, and we've got just a little bit of time. And so I was talking about, these artifacts that are now being discovered worldwide, and which all give accounting. Appreciate you as well, Sky. But anyways, that give accounting to this incredible information that is now coming to light worldwide, and which actually verifies that there was not a people, because we're not talking like humanity or humans were not responsible for the creation of these megalithic structures worldwide, but we're talking about the fallen angels, the rebel angels, the Annunaki, the dragons of old, the mythology of the feathered serpent. These particular beings are the ones that ruled over the world during the Priortimes, and that they were the ones that built all these megalithic structures that science cannot explain, and that largely ignores. You don't see all these mainstream scientists that are trying to uphold this whole evolutionary theory that we evolved a monkeys somehow. You don't see them explaining or talking about all these megalithic sites and how they came into being. No, they don't make any kind of commentary on anything that challenges their belief system and the theses that they wrote to get their PhD degrees, when all of it is contrived and based on malarkey, really, and that their degrees and their careers and their professions are worthless, and that they'll fight to hold on to and to mold all the evidence to fit their subjective theories, when all of it is BS. And so, anyways, this is where we are as far as world. Everybody knows that there are artifacts found all over the world, thousands and thousands of artifacts which are considered anomalous because they do not fit into the official story for how humanity evolved of apes and came to be where we are now, and that everybody considers all, humans to be at the height of um, culture and civilization, when in fact we are at the lowest degree of technological ability and capacity, and that the ancients, especially when we're referencing the fallen angels, they had capacities and abilities that far exceeded ours, and that we are not able to replicate even their building techniques, with the way that they created all these megalithic structures worldwide and put them into place, and how most of these structures are still standing to this day, and um, that have survived countless years and earthquakes and weather patterns and rain, and over thousands and thousands of years. And we can't build a structure that lasts, more than 200 years. And so, um, I, yeah, I guess, Justin, that I'm just, I'm kind of fed up with the mainstream um, propaganda and all that they try to pull over on us. But I guess that's my rant for the evening. And so we're about 3 or 4 minutes out. I do just want to ask all of you to not believe anything that I say, or nor what any of the other hosts say on any of the programs here, to not just have faith and confidence that we're correct in our assumptions, but to do your own homework, to put forth effort in doing your own investigation to confirm whether there's relevance to the things that we are espousing here. And that you should not just blindly obligate yourself to anything that anybody says without having first determined whether it's true or not for you. And that everything should be tried and tested. And that you should take it to the Most High and ask them for discernment upon all these things. Because so many people are attempting to deceive, and it's the blind leading the blind out there. How many people do you know that you can even really talk to about these things? I mean, can you really go to your pastor or your preacher or your so-called church authority and ask them about the rebel angels or the Priortimes, or Cain being a son of the serpent, or pre-existence, or any of these things? For the children, for this generation that is growing up, that has nobody to look to for answer, that is hungry for answers to the dilemmas, to the questions that nobody can answer, that realizes that most of what they're being taught in school, or what they're being told as reality, is all fabricated and based on the opinions of those that are more lost than they. I mean, they want answers. They want the truth, and there's nobody to give it to them. And so that's why it's critical that we come together in the way that we do, to share dialogue and to share fellowship in the way that we do, and that we empower and assist one another to come to terms with what exactly is truth and what exactly reality, um, the strange nature of what we are dealing with as a world. And I would say at least 98%, maybe 99.95% of most teachers, those that have PhD degrees, those that are teaching in universities, those that are, um, you know, speaking from the bully pulpit or that are teaching sermons in most mainstream churches, that they have no idea what the truth really is. God bless all. Good night. We'll see you next week. Be blessed. I don't even know where they're doing their shows or where they're based, but a lot of people have asked me just recently to come on with them and to speak about some of the things that I've written and talked about in my books. It seems like there are a number of people whom are curious about, as far as the two bloodlines and the things that are connected to them, to that issue. Hello and welcome, Tinsel Worm and Agent 99 and Hal and Daku and Breezy and Lois Phoenix and Sky and Deep Blue and Chatfly and Sack and there's a lot of people, Jer Bear and Ariana and all those that aren't on the initial stream moving upwards. I'm sure, Wild Bob and Cortec and Vibes and all of you, Delta, Deep Blue. Anyways, welcome and thank you for taking the time to join us and supporting all of us in the endeavors that we bring forth and trying to bring important issues, topics, and news of what we consider to be relevant to you for your consideration so that you can hopefully find some benefit from whatever it is that we may be discoursing about. And there's so many hosts on Revolution Radio, both on Studio A and Studio B, that you can find most anything being spoken about. And usually at least some of the hosts will be covering what are the most important current events of the day, or at least for that week, and probably multiple hosts, talking about it from one angle or the other. And so I think that's really interesting thing as far as Revolution Radio and the family that have congregated to be here and are utilizing Revolution Radio in such capacity to bring forth the information that we have opportunity to do so. Prior accepted just because it was broadcast on ABC or CBS or NBC, and nobody ever even really gave it a second thought and just accepted it as truth because it somehow found its way on one of the the mainstream news outlets. But now we know that, especially with the big three, that they are largely working in tangent and that the information parallels on all broadcasts, and that now, ever since with the Patriot Act, and there now is a whole and budget, a huge budget put forth by the government to create news content which would then be shared and passed out to all the official networks so that they can basically toe the party line and share the propaganda that's been generated by government to sway public opinion one way or the other. And so now it's absolutely undeniable that most of what we are seeing, especially with, like CNN, those things which cover so-called world news, is basically only propaganda, and it's a tool utilized to guide and direct opinion one way or the other. And that most of the time, such public opinion is gleaned only to support a topic or an agenda. And that all of this was laid out, dozens, if not hundreds of years ago, and that this information is also cited very precisely in the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, and how they talk about that all they need to do really to control the masses is buy off both parties and certain political representatives, and then to own the media, and that includes, TV and radio, and also what was then hard paper newspaper.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Fading, my back hurts and my arms are tired. I'm fighting off sleep, though I'm flowing so well. I want one more poem to mark occasion, give rise to that voice inside, as I praise the Most High for conscious being. The ocean churns quietly, courting night in peaceful lullaby, until acquainting day in new rendering. Good night, sweet muse of uncertain word. Let us dance again tomorrow in new poem. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen, and I will be with you for the next 2 hours here on Studio B at freedomslips.com on Revolution Radio. And we're going to cover initially just some current events and some recent news stories that have come to light, and just some interesting tidbits, and then we'll go into some other information. I don't really have a specific topic or a specific anything that I want to or need to cover this evening, and so I'll just kind of be sharing dialogue with you and watching the chat room, and making conversation and sharing fellowship with all of you and in dialogue. I have been doing recently a number of interviews with other broadcasters from different paper and the columnists and the different individuals that work for such publications, or that are the bobbleheads on TV, and that they could then basically control reality and also control what is perceived as truth or lie. And having asserted their authority and basically unified all these various individual news and media outlets, whether TV or radio or newspaper or magazine even, that they have unified all of them under a few such companies like Rupert and Murdoch, all of these different, what seem to be individualized, separate pieces are controlled from the top down, and they cannot really present information that is critical of what they are trying to pull off as reality. And so it's an interesting world we live in. But now, those of you that are seekers and that have done your research, you like myself have been called to seek out new forms and new places of gathering your information, and that places like beforeitsnews.com and where you have this user-generated content, I think are invaluable. It's just like all of us coming together here and sharing fellowship on the different, like my show and the other shows, that because there's so many of them. But the fellowship that we share is absolutely critical and totally invaluable, because where else are you going to find a group of individuals that have done the time and done the homework and have spent a large part of their focus in trying to educate themselves to what is really going on in the world? I mean, you have most of the people that are told is that you will get unique and interesting perspectives, and usually from various angles. And that certainly, as widely diversified as there are hosts upon the network, that you will also get that many opinions and that much various commentary about these, whatever it is that may be compelling, as far as, whether it's a false flag event or some kind of special circumstance, a sign in the sun, the moon, the stars, or, commentary about a new discovery or some new ancient book of wisdom, or some passage that has recently come to light and that may be lighting up the web stream, at least the internet, and that many alternative news sources will be carrying it all at once. And so and I know that a lot of you follow some of, as far as, like, I get some of the information that I post on fallenangels.tv, which is my main website, from beforeitsnews.com. And the reason I do so is because it's not controlled just by one individual, but it is user generated, in that the content is largely uploaded by all the individuals that have taken the time to sign up there, that have used it to share information, and that because it is from all of these individuals, the collective, the masses as a whole, you'll find information being, brought up from all eras, especially with the Grand Awakening that's been happening since the events of 9/11, and which really sparked a lot of us to look into, like the conspiratorial side of propaganda, which we know to be propaganda now, but what are the government official stories and the things which have been